Hi everyone, this is lecture 1.1, the first lecture in our Dynamics of Difference, Power, and Discrimination course. This is labeled Sociology 216, and I am Professor Jeremy E. Baker. One quick note before I get started on anything, the lecture numbering. So this is lecture 1.1. So the first one indicates it's part of our first unit. There are 8 units in the course, but the weeks of the course do not necessarily correspond with the lecture. So for example, you could next week have lecture 1.2. It just depends, but it would be week 2. The next week would be 2.0. It just depends how the lectures best fit with the content matter of that given week. So now that I've thoroughly bored you, let's move on to actually talk about the course. There is a really amazing quote found on page 3 of your reader. I do like to throw in these quotes as they match what we're talking about on this first agenda slide. I think this very long sentence sums up the course very well. It can be challenging to discover that skin tone, accented speech, perceived gender or sexual orientation, or the presence or absence of a physical or mental disability are themselves socially constructed categories and are, therefore, useless as indicators of talent, character, intelligence, or morality. That is what we're talking about in this course. We are talking about are social constructions of how we categorize people. And many of the social constructions of how we categorize people lead to treating people unfairly, right? Lead to unfair characteristics of people and lead to prejudice and discrimination. So that's what we're talking about in this course. We're talking about how to sift through that stuff to get to what is actually the content of an individual's character. It's basically the stuff Martin Luther King was talking about. It's amazing, but it's hard to deal with. But anyway, this lecture will be talking about introductions, and then after I'm done with introductions to the course, to myself, we will talk about what exactly social sciences are and what exactly sociology is. I know one of the prerequisites for this course should be a Social 101 course, so you probably really know what social sciences are and really know what sociology is, but this is just a reminder if it's been a while since you've taken that course. So, who am I? My name is Jeremy E. Baker, as I said. I specialized in social movements and studying unions in graduate school. I went to The Ohio State University. I do live in Columbus, Ohio, so this is an important thing to remember about me. I do not live in New Mexico. As a result, I will not be able to meet with you personally. I will answer your emails to the best of my ability, and I'd like to stay up on that. If absolutely necessary, we can do a phone conversation if things get dicey. I also teach for Columbus State Community College. I teach for UNM Los Alamos, and I also teach for UNM Valencia. I teach Introduction to Sociology. I teach Social Problems. I teach Public Policy and Criminal Justice, which the way I teach that course is very much a study of the prison system. I teach Sociological Deviance, and I teach this course Dynamics of Difference, Power, and Discrimination. My research interests include LGBT issues, family issues, and working class issues. One minor note on the recordings here, I don't know, you probably haven't heard it because I have a relatively good microphone on my computer. I live by train tracks. I have a parrot and a dog, and I have 2 small children. So if you hear anything weird in the background, it could be any of those things. I do record in one of the more quiet rooms in my house, so hopefully that won't be an issue, but it could come up. So, in our first discussion, we're going to use this to introduce yourself as well. You're going to give your name, a little bit about you, and then answer the question, how has your life been devalued by our society? Another way to ask that question, how have you been oppressed? We have all been oppressed in some way by the nature of our society, right? Some of us have been oppressed differently than other people, but we have all been oppressed. And the goal of this discussion is to explore how we have all been oppressed in one way or another, with the acknowledgement that some of us have been oppressed dramatically more than other people. One of the underlying themes of this course, though, is to try to understand how others have been oppressed, right? Not to, quote unquote, win the oppression Olympics, right? To say that I've been oppressed more than you doesn't really get very far in trying to fix society. But in trying to acknowledge how others have been oppressed, then we can try to fix society for the better. And that, this course isn't going to fix society, right? But it might give you the tools to fix to your community, right? Which, fixing your community, that's huge, right? So now let's review the syllabus and review the online classroom a bit. For this, I'm going to be going outside of PowerPoint. I don't like to do that in these lectures, but it's what needs to be done right now, so please excuse the messiness of how my computer looks. Let's look at the syllabus first. Okay, please excuse that we have to stare at Word for a little bit. This is the Los Alamos syllabus. If you're taking this course, you're probably taking it at Los Alamos, but you might be at Valencia for all I know, or somewhere else. With my email, please send your emails to me at profjebaker@unm.edu. That is the email you should use if you are communicating to me as a student from UNM. And please use your UNM email. That's incredibly important because the way the UNM email system works is that sometimes it buries emails that are not from UNM. So if you are communicating to me as a student, please do it that way. That's actually incredibly important. But if for some reason that you cannot get a hold of me because of that UNM email, you can try to use my email from Columbus State, which is jbake100@cscc.edu. But I do discourage you from using that email address, not because I don't want you to email me, but because there are similar issues at CSCC and CSCC email addresses. And also, when I'm looking at that email, I'm thinking Columbus State, I'm not thinking UNM. Anyway, I'm just going to skim over this to the readily available thing. Our book is Readings for Diversity and Social Justice, 3rd edition. The edition that you get is critically important because the different editions have different readings. You absolutely do need this book. That ISBN number should be correct. Quite frankly, I don't care where you get the book, but if you buy it someplace that isn't the UNM bookstore, you won't be able to return it to the UNM bookstore. Our course objectives, I'm not going to read through each of these, but these are the things that you should have learned by the end of the course. And each week also has its own objectives that I have laid out. Those are the things I expect you to learn during the course, during that week. If you look those over, you might get some useful study tips, is what I'm saying for you. I mean, a lot of the stuff you see for all your courses. Here is a layout for exactly how you're going to be scored. There are a total of 520 points for this course. There is a midterm essay, a final essay. There are a number of shorter essays. There are quizzes. There are discussions. Here are the point totals for what constitutes what grades in the course. And that lays that out there. I'm not going over these in detail because you can read these on your own, and I don't want to be super boring. Formatting is important for your papers. You can look that over. We do use American Sociological Association standard, which is similar to other formatting systems. I have a section of the course on how to write in sociology if you have questions on that. If you've used APA, it's pretty similar to that. Honestly, it's not that different from MLA or most other systems. The key is to basically just try. I don't grant extra credit. If you're concerned with your grade, ask me. There are other ways to fix a grade other than extra credit. Attendance and participation is important. If you don't participate in the first 2 weeks, UNM department policy is to drop you from the course by Wednesday of week 3. Just because we're online doesn't mean you don't have to attend. That's important to know. By this point in your academic career, you should know about plagiarism. If you have any questions as to what plagiarism is or isn't, please contact me directly. Basically, it's using other people's work as your own work. Yeah. If that's confusing, please let me know. Technical requirements. Here are contact information for tech support through UNM. That is important for my online course. Oh, the Americans with Disabilities Act. If you have some sort of disability, if you have a learning disability, if you have a visual impairment, a hearing impairment, anything like that, that could impact how you take the course, I need to know about that as soon as possible, and it needs to be registered with the university. It would be discriminating against you if I would think, oh, this person I think has a disability, so I'm going to treat them different because I think they have a disability. You have to tell me about that stuff, and you have to show me the paperwork. I'm not allowed to help you without that. So please get that stuff to me as soon as possible. If you don't have a disability, that's no problem there. Okay, so this course schedule is probably the most important thing to you for the course. So we have laid out here how the course is going to go. I don't have laid out in this exactly which lectures to watch when. That will be laid out in our course itself. And you have listed here when you're doing your discussions, when you're doing your quizzes, when to submit essays. So for example, in this first week, you have to take part in our discussion 1, and by Sunday, you have to make at least 2 comment posts in discussion 1. And then on Sunday, our discussion will be over. And then next week, what you have to do is watch the lectures that I post and write your essay for that week. So really, every other week, so week 1 is 1 part, week 2 is another part to a half, and between week 1 and 2, that's 1 entire unit. So week 1 and 2 is our theory, week 3 and 4 is racism, week 5 and 6 is classism, etc., etc., etc. And that is our syllabus. So now that I'm done boring you in that way, let's look at our online classroom. This is what it should look like for you. Here you will have our announcements section. On our left-hand side, we'll have announcements. Here's that how to write in sociology section. If you want to know how to write our papers, I have lectures and that sort of thing there. The start here section is important. There's a little about me. That's a picture of my wife and my family. Here is where you get a copy of the syllabus. If you haven't had don't have a copy of the syllabus yet, here's some contact information for me. A link to buy your book if you don't have it yet. If you don't have your book yet, get it like pause this lecture and go order it now. And then there's a link for the course objectives. Anything else that needs to be explained? Here's a quick link to our discussion boards and our quiz and essays. And then you don't have, if chances are when you're watching this, you will not have access to week 2, week 3, week 4, week 5, week 6. You'll just see these unit headings. And most likely what you see right now in week 1 is just week 1 being exposed. That's how we pace you through the course. And then as time passes, say in week 3, you will have access to week 1, week 2, and week 3. That way you can go back and watch lectures again or study previous material, but you will not be able to work way ahead. That is to help you know where to be, right? So if you thought all this stuff was boring back here, but for some reason you wanted to get right to religious oppression, you wouldn't be able to do that, because honestly, if you jump way ahead, you will not necessarily understand material we covered back here. And everything is laid out for a purpose. So that's that. If you have any questions with the online classroom or materials there, please let me know. Glitches happen all the time with online learning, unfortunately. And if you have issues with that, please let me know so I can try to fix it for you as quickly as I possibly can. Okay. Now, let us get back to the actual PowerPoint presentation. So topics we'll talk about in this course are racism, classism, religious oppression, sexism, heterosexism, transgender oppression, and ableism. There certainly are other types of prejudice and other types of discrimination in society. Specifically in this course, your book covers ageism, and we will not be able to get to that only because I picked the things that students most frequently ask about. I'm basing this off of my interactions with students in the past. These are the things that students are very interested in. If you're not super familiar with this kind of subject matter, you might not necessarily see a difference between sexism and heterosexism, or know how heterosexism is different than transgender oppression, or how racism is different than religious oppression, or any of this, right? That's why we're in the course. This stuff, the differences are very clear, and very, very much worth talking about, because people get really upset about this stuff, and if you don't know what they're talking about, you don't know why they're upset, so you might dismiss them. And that's no way to get through society either. So let's talk about specifically what social sciences are and what sociology is. And it sounds silly to define things like this, but honest to God, I didn't really get this until I was in my first year at graduate school as a sociologist. So it's good to lay this out. So sociology is a social science. Other social sciences include psychology, economics, and criminology. There are other social sciences as well. We use the scientific method. We are not anything other than a science. We are not humanities. We are not history. We are not political science. We are not literature. Those other disciplines are interesting ways of knowing, right? But a historian is not a scientist. A political scientist is not a scientist. That's just the unfortunate name of that given discipline. A philosopher is not a science. We use the scientific method, which is a series of steps that we use in studying things as scientists. We use scientific methods. We are as much of a science as physics is, as chemistry is. We just study different things. As I mentioned, the scientific method is, and I'll talk about this in more detail in coming lectures, these steps: literature review, form a hypothesis, test the hypothesis, review data, communicate findings. Just like you would use that in chemistry to study the composition of salt, we use it in sociology to study the composition of racism. Which, if you're not familiar with how we do that, it can be mind-blowing, and it's fun. Sociologists have a weird definition of fun. Research methods, we can use experiments, but we go beyond that. We can use field observation. We can use analysis of text. We can use statistical analysis. We use all kinds of research methods in sociology. And again, we'll talk about that in more detail in coming lectures. We have 3 levels of analysis in general in sociology. And this is where things might be a little bit different from your Social 101 course. We have the micro level analysis, which is the small scale level, which is one-on-one between people, maybe between small groups of 5 or fewer, right? We have the macro level of analysis, which is the huge picture. So talking about things like the U.S. Army, Target Corporation, or the United Nations, right? Big, big, big things. And one thing you may not have addressed in your Social 101 course is the meso level of analysis. It's said meso. It's sometimes spelled M-E-Z-Z-O. It's sometimes spelled M-E-S-O. It's the medium scale. Honest to goodness, I sometimes go either way as to how I spell it, but what's important is to understand that it's the medium scale. It is the in-between micro and macro. We often don't address that in Social 101 because you're still getting used to the idea, but there is an in-between the things. This is talking about bigger groups. So maybe like people at your family reunion of like 80 people, right? Those dynamics are different than the dynamics of you and 5 people, right? Students at your campus. People in a small town, right? People in a small town have a different dynamic than people in New York City or people at the United Nations, right? It's a different thing. So because of that, we have that middle level of analysis, and that is also necessary when we're talking about more sophisticated social science, like we would in courses past 101. And now I've talked about what sociology is. Let's talk about what it's not. We're not a political party. Sociologists should hypothetically, in one way of viewing it, via value-free sociology, we should be neutral. We're not always neutral, but we should strive for that. We are not a philosophy. This is a science, right? And just because we believe something's true in sociology today, it can be disproven, just like it can be in any other science. But the things that we believe today, which is something that many people don't understand about science, the things that we believe today, we believe for a very good reason. We have good data to back that stuff up. It's not just because we think it's a fun idea, it's because there's data to back it up, which makes us science. And we are not just a series of opinions as sociologists. It's not, hey, I like the opinions of the sociology teacher, so he's a good sociologist. That shouldn't be how you judge a sociologist. We are people who espouse studying the world in a scientific way. So statements made in worthwhile sociology texts and presentations must be backed up with scientific data, must be cited in references and citations. We don't always do that in sociology lectures. I don't always do that in my sociology lectures because it bogs things down, right? But anything that I state in one of my lectures, I can go find you the reference for, right? I don't just say something like, men oppress women in our society, and women are therefore subject of sexism in their day-to-day lives, right? That's not my opinion. That is sociological and scientific fact. And I can get you the resources and references to back that up, but it slows down the lecture process and the learning process to do that. But if when stated, if you see anything in my lectures that needs backed up, that you would like to hear more about, please ask, right? Because I'm here to help you learn. I'm not here to indoctrinate you. I am here to show you what sociology has found up to this point. And we'll talk more about references and citations later on in the course. Your course reader is, I picked it specifically not to make you read every single piece in the book. The things that I want you to read are listed in the syllabus, but also to help you give you resources, right? If you do want to read more about something, there might be something in that reader to read about. But we'll talk more about that later in the course. That's it for now for our first lecture. I hope this was interesting for you, and you may go on to watch the next lecture, but I don't know if it'll be available to you. I'll see you in the discussion boards, and have a good one.